Corporate profits are up 5 times the rate of inflation. We got to do something about it.
What do you think? This week in Pennsylvania, we sit down with U.S. Senator Bob Casey, who's going to war with what he calls greedflation, and a Republican challenger. 2 court rulings on voting matters, one involving mail-in ballots, the other how we register to vote. And it has been 45 years since the worst nuclear accident in U.S. history. What's happening at 3 Mile Island today, and what's its legacy? Hello, happy Easter weekend, and welcome to This Week in Pennsylvania. I'm Dennis Owens. We're going to hop into the hot topics in PA policy and politics, as well as the issues that are important to you and your family. Well, the back and forth saga of undated and dated mail-in ballots took another legal turn this week. A federal appeals court says, yes, you must properly date the outer envelope per the law, or your ballot can be rejected. In November, you remember, a lower court judge had ruled even without the proper dates, mail-in ballots should be counted if they're received on time, because that date on the outer envelope is a superfluous paperwork error, they argued. But the Third Circuit Court of Appeals overturned that this week. Thousands of votes with the wrong dates or no dates were declared invalid in the 2022 election, but many then were counted in November of 23. Efforts to stop automatic voter registration in Pennsylvania have failed. Last fall, eligible citizens getting a new driver's license were automatically registered to vote. The conservative Pennsylvania Freedom Caucus filed a federal lawsuit against Governor Shapiro and President Biden, saying that's unconstitutional. Well, a federal court dismissed the lawsuit this week. Governor Shapiro issued a statement calling it frivolous. House Republicans once again this week pushed for a requirement that voters show photo ID. The GOP insists it would reduce fraud. Democrats argue it disenfranchises legitimate voters. That debate is not new. What is new? My colleague Seth Kaplan found that both sides might be wrong. Here's Seth.
Bring to the House a floor vote for a constitutional amendment to require voter identification at every election.
PA House Republican leader Brian Cutler again asking for what Republicans have long wanted.
Voter ID is an easy way to ensure eligibility, not unlike the ID cards we all show at a doctor's office or a bank. An ID is required for many of the things we buy and do.
Easy for most, but not all legal voters, worry Democratic leaders who say, quote, the Constitution grants rights, it doesn't and shouldn't take away rights.
I think Democrats genuinely are concerned that it is going to hurt their voters more.
That's public radio political reporter Steve Harrison in North Carolina, where Republicans got their wish, a voter photo ID requirement on the ballot and overwhelmingly approved by voters. The primary there earlier this month, the first statewide election under the new rules.
I thought it was really important after this first election, this first real test, to take a look and see what was the impact of this new law.
1.8 million people voted. 473 people turned away under the new law because they didn't have ID.
We looked closely to see who those 473 people were. 174 were Republicans. 171 were Democrats. There were just under 300 white voters and 74 black voters.
White voters rejected by a 4-to-1 margin compared to black voters in an election when they only outnumbered black voters overall 3-to-1.
So at first glance, there was no real disparity in terms of who photo ID was impacting.
And what about Republican concerns about fraud? North Carolina audited its 2016 election.
There was only 1 or 2 cases of in-person voter fraud, someone trying to vote twice or vote in someone else's name out of millions of ballots cast.
Steve Harrison conceded just because you only have 1 or 2 known cases of in-person fraud doesn't mean there couldn't have been more, just as, on the other hand, maybe some legal voters weren't rejected for lack of ID but stayed home because of the ID requirement. But with both parties' concerns about this issue seemingly overblown and with polls showing voters generally siding with Republicans on this issue, Republicans might be correct when they said at their news conference, maybe this issue could become part of a broader compromise, Democrats giving ground on photo ID in exchange for other priorities. For This Week in Pennsylvania, I'm Seth Kaplan.
Our thanks to Seth. Farmers converged on the Capitol this week to share their concerns with lawmakers, and there are several, most notably costs. Transportation costs, fuel costs, production costs are all up, yet the amount of money the farmers actually get is not keeping pace. Marty Yonner is a Cambria County cattle farmer who says he knows consumers are frustrated at prices in the grocery store, but farmers aren't the ones cashing in.
We also raise corn, oats, wheat, hay, and soybeans. And in many cases, we're being paid the same price for grain as many years ago. And everyone knows the cost of production is way up. So we're always in that price cost squeeze.
He also reminds everybody that Americans by far pay a smaller percentage of their disposable income on food than any other place on the planet. Pennsylvania's youngest state lawmakers are joining forces and unveiled their legislative priorities this week. The Future Caucus includes Gen Z and millennials from both parties. Their goal is to reduce staggering costs that are really stifling their age group, who are trying to buy their first house, paying off student loans, and if they start a family, face prohibitive child care costs. Initiatives include tax breaks to first-time home buyers and ensuring adequate parental leave.
The financial landscape needs to change in order to empower Pennsylvanians to achieve their personal goals, and we're excited to work to make that happen.
So for states like Pennsylvania, which we are growing but not at the rate of other states, a lot of this is around thinking about how we keep those future generations here.
And the PA Future Caucus is bipartisan with about 20 members. Speaking of homes, there are a lot of historic homes in Pennsylvania. There's also a lot of run-down homes in desperate need of repair that the owners just can't afford to fix. Governor Josh Shapiro was around the state touting his whole home repairs budget request. He wants $50 million state dollars to give grants to lower-income Pennsylvanians so they can do needed and long-neglected home improvement projects. The governor insists the needs are great, but he knows legislative Republicans are wary of his numerous spending proposals.
They can't use analysis as an excuse for paralysis. Now is the time to act. And I would say to any lawmakers who don't like an idea I put forth, well, what's your idea?
And it's a real testament, I think, to the ancestors that built these homes, because they are still here after suffering lots of neglect, but they need a lifeline.
And if it passes as part of the budget, the state would provide the money, but the counties would administer the program. Stay with us. When we come back, we're sitting down with U.S. Senator Bob Casey, who is seeking a fourth term.
This PA Chamber Minute is paid for by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry.
We've watched 64 Made in PA products battle it out on social media during our second annual Coolest Thing Made in PA competition. This contest has taken the internet by storm as thousands of votes have been cast for everything from Reese's Peanut Butter Cups to Martin guitars. Now, the contest is heading into its third week and we're down to the final 16. And looking at who's left on the board, it is shaping up to be an exciting finale. Pennsylvanians are continuing to make their voices heard by voting on the PA Chamber's X and Instagram pages leading up to the championship round, April 10th through April 11th. If you haven't done so already, now is the time to get in the game. Visit our website at pachamber.org/coolest thing and go to the PA Chamber's X and Instagram pages to cast your vote today.
Bob Casey calls it greedflation, and he's fighting back.
Well, that's a new campaign ad released by U.S. Senator Bob Casey, who is trying to grow support by shrinking costs for consumers. He's taking on Republican Dave McCormick, and it is expected to be close. President Biden gave Casey's shrinkflation bill a shout-out during the State of the Union, even called him Bobby Casey. That's where our conversation began.
If you're going to shrink the product, then shrink the price. Simple as that. But in terms of the overall issue of greedflation, look, when consumers have to buy food products on a regular basis, go to the grocery store, have to buy household items, they've got to keep making those purchases. You can't keep jacking up those prices.
A lot of those are private transactions. What is a governmental solution?
Well, part of it is allowing the Federal Trade Commission to do what it has very limited authority to do now. Conduct a price gouging investigation, complete the investigation. If a determination is made that there's been a deceptive act or practice, then there's a civil penalty. I think it's the only way to get the company's attention. When these companies are jacking up their prices and achieving huge record corporate profits, corporate profits are up 5 times the rate of inflation. We got to do something about it.
Is there any Pennsylvania companies you have in the crosshairs of doing this that you know of?
We've talked about a lot of companies across the board, not just snack food, but all kinds of groceries across the board. These companies have to check with consumers before they jack up their prices. The only way to do that, the only way to hold them accountable, is to let them know they could be investigated and there could be a consequence.
So let's talk about spending. 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, our debt is now $34 trillion. Concerned about that? And can you name an area or two where you say, we got to cut?
You know where we can start? With the tax code. And you have to understand that in 2017, that tax bill jacked up the debt by $2 trillion. In most of it, the overwhelming lion's share of that went to the very top, the wealthiest people in the country, a bonanza of tax breaks we've never seen in American history.
Critics, including Dave McCormick, say, about the greedflation, shrinkflation, whatever, that President Biden and by extension Bob Casey caused the inflation. Now they're complaining about it.
If Dave McCormick wants to defend those price increases at the grocery store when people are paying for food or household items, I'd love to have that debate with him. He should go to the grocery store in Pennsylvania. I don't know what it's like in Connecticut. He spends most of his time in Connecticut. He lives up there. That's what the Associated Press told us. But he should come to Pennsylvania, go to a grocery store, and learn what those prices are.
When I say to you, what are you most proud of? If you were to tell a viewer, here's the best thing I did in my public service.
I think in terms of individual work that I've done, look, voting for the PACT Act that helped our veterans who were exposed to these toxic burn pits, which your channel did a lot of coverage on and pushed it hard. That's one vote that I would stand out.
What's the big dangling issue that if you're elected to the Senate, what's the big thing you now want to push?
I'd like to do a lot more to invest in kids and our families. I don't think the federal government does nearly enough to have a strategy for kids so that we're investing in their health care long term, we're investing in their early learning, we're investing in their protection, making sure they have enough to eat, making sure they have an economic foundation. I've got a bill that would create like a 401k account almost for every child born in the country, so by the time they become an adult they have a nest egg that they wouldn't have otherwise.
Can I call you Bobby, or is that only reserved for the president?
Call me whatever you want, Dennis.
We're going to call him back for another segment, talk abortion, John Fetterman, and whether President Biden is an electoral liability, right after the break.
They're selfish and soft. I'm running for the Senate to make the hard calls. That's why I approve this message.
And that's Republican U.S. Senate candidate Dave McCormick, also releasing a TV ad this week, touting his Pennsylvania high school wrestling roots. Experts say the presidential race could impact the U.S. Senate race. I asked Bob Casey if he'll be hurt with President Biden at the top of the ticket.
No. Look, people are going to vote in the presidential race and in my Senate race based upon what I present as in terms of my candidacy, what my opponent will. And they vote on the presidential race for sometimes related but often different considerations. So it'll be up to the voters.
And the voters have always sent you back there. So the voters have been pretty good to
I've been blessed. I've been blessed.
Are you concerned there could be complacency?
Well, Dennis, you got to earn every vote every time you run, and I expect to be in a very tough race, and I'll have to earn every vote.
According to polls, immigration and inflation are top issues now. Abortion and immigration. Abortion seems to be sliding off a little bit. Are you concerned about, because people look at that and they think that's a vote for a Republican? Because many people, rightly or wrongly, blame the president for that.
Yeah. Look, I don't know how the pundits will sort it out, but I will say this. I think when voters make this decision on the Senate race, they're going to see I've been a senator who's delivered for them, for their families, and for their communities, and is also fighting battles that they want us to fight, like the fight to get these prices in check at the grocery store.
Where would you say you are on the issue of abortion? You support a woman's right to choose?
Dennis, I do, and here's where it is. We've reached a point in the debate about abortion. There's a fork in the road after the Dobbs decision. You're either in one lane or the other. You're either going to support a ban on abortion, which is really what Dobbs brought about, and then you have other bans coming after it, maybe a national ban. I voted for the Women's Health Protection Act, which would provide the same protection for that right in law that Dobbs took away. So it's a clear distinction, I think, in the race.
Why should the average Pennsylvania voter be concerned about the potential of a Senator Dave McCormick?
In the time I've been in the Senate, he was running the biggest hedge fund in the world, where he was investing in China, helping the rise of China, and at times investing on behalf of the regime in China, while I was doing work to help the people of Pennsylvania, delivering for families and communities. That's what he was spending his time on. So I think it's going to be pretty clear by the end of this race who's on the side of Pennsylvanians.
What do you think of the job John Fetterman has done? And it seems that his health is much better. I see him.
Yeah,
but I haven't seen him personally.
He's doing really well. And he showed a lot of courage when he went to Walter Reed to get help for depression, and it changed his life.
Bring all of these people back home.
And there's a number of Republicans that love the last three big public pronouncements he's made on both Israel. There should be no ceasefire. Do you have a thought on ceasefire, by the way?
I think we've got to try to get a hostage deal first. That would be where there would be a deal on hostages. As part of that, there'd be a period of time where there'd be a ceasefire in place. But you've got to get that broader deal into place. The Israelis have agreed to it. The Americans have. The Egyptians, the Qataris, the holdout over and over again. Every time seems like a deal, Hamas. It's a terrorist organization that's got to be defeated.
You're kind of the odd couple, though, cargo shorts, and he's not afraid to just say what's on his mind at all times. You seem a little more reserved and just a difference in style.
Well, I don't think the people of Pennsylvania want two senators with exactly the same personality. Dennis, good to see you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
And a new poll this week shows that Casey is up 3, but at 45%. Experts say that's not great for a 3-term incumbent and could mean he's in for a very close race in November. 45 years ago this week, the eyes of the world were on a tiny island in the middle of the Susquehanna River, just outside Harrisburg. The nation's worst nuclear accident was unfolding, international news media descending, and local residents worrying. Energy is no longer produced there, but the fallout continues. Passing traffic is all you'll hear at 3 Mile Island these days.
No one was reported exposed to any of the radiation.
But 45 years ago, the entire world heard of the nuclear plant on the Susquehanna River, most for the first time.
There was a buildup of pressure and temperature in the primary system.
The meltdown was partial, the panic, much more than that.
When all of a sudden, all of these parents start to rush to the front of the school, and they look so scared and frightened and frantic.
Maria Frisbee was in class at nearby Middletown High School.
I had a strong metallic taste in my mouth. I never tasted anything like that before.
And America's nuclear industry has never seen anything like that before or since. Worst accident in U.S. history.
This has been our most popular exhibit yet.
Taylor Mason is an archivist for the PA House who put together a TMI exhibit with a timeline, documents from a special investigating committee, snarky T-shirts, vintage photos, and videos. Taylor wasn't born in '79. For her, this is a history lesson.
I learned the biggest thing was how passionate people were about it and how nervous they were. This never happened before, really, so it was a really big time in Pennsylvania's history.
For Maria, it's not just history.
What I'm going to do right now is just a moment of silence for these cancer victims right here.
She insists that neighbors, friends, classmates exposed that day are still suffering today.
And then they're dying. It's just too many. It's a big, big cancer cluster.
The medical studies are mixed, the science spotty at best.
Part of the reason we don't have the data is that the industry wasn't prepared. The company, whether they did it intentionally or unintentionally, simply not prepared to gauge the amount of radiation that was released.
For 42 years, Eric Epstein has run TMI Alert, a nuclear watchdog, who says yes, they're closed and inactive, but there's still much to keep an eye on.
I mean, it would be foolish to think that you look at the plants and there's no danger. That's absolutely not the case. TMI-2 is still highly radioactive, and TMI-1 has tons of spent fuel on site, on an island, in a river. You know, not a great formula for security.
And decommissioning is underway, but it's a very long process. One reactor won't be done until the 2050s. The other not scheduled to be complete until the 2070s. A meltdown of sorts on the House floor this week over a product that does melt. Chocolate. A 26-minute debate on whether the Hershey Kiss should be Pennsylvania's official state candy. Supporters say Hershey is known around the globe. Opponents argue PA has lots of other good candies like Peeps, Mike and Ike's, and hot tamales. Lawmakers didn't stick to sweet talking.
The Hershey Kiss is the hallmark of both the Hershey Company and Pennsylvania. I'm sure everybody will agree that everybody loves a kiss.
But Mr. Speaker, people do not love a kiss when it is not consensual.
Mr. Speaker, it's ridiculous that we are favoring a freaking piece of candy.
The gentleman is reminded to please use language that is appropriate for the decorum of the House.
I don't think I used any of the words you can't say on the radio.
We ought not enter into a naming rights agreement with a corporation when the Commonwealth will get nothing extra in return.
Russ Diamond there, who opposes the bill, was actually born in Hershey. The bill passed, but its future is uncertain. And a good lesson about the speed or lack thereof of government for the Bucks County middle school students who originally came up with the idea. They are now juniors in high school, and they were in the chamber. And it may be called the state candy. It may not be called the state candy. I call them pretty darn good. We had a sweeter story unfolding on the lawn of the governor's residence this week. The annual Easter egg hunt held this week, hosted by Governor Shapiro and wife Lori. The governor did use the moment to push for increased funding for early childhood education.
They were so excited. The teachers are just so appreciative when they get these opportunities for their kids. This is kind of a once in a lifetime type of event.
Good times had by all, as you can see on the lawn, even some bunnies out there as well. Note that all of us on This Week in Pennsylvania would like to wish you and your families a blessed Easter. We hope all of your baskets are overflowing, whether it be with kisses or something else. We thank you for joining us each and every week. If you missed any of this show or any show, you can watch them all on thisweekinpennsylvania.com. Thanks for being with us this week. Sure hope to see you right here next weekend.